I will never forget that night when everything changed forever. I am Ayla, a young Navajo teacher, and I was returning home after a long day of work at the reservation school. It was around 9 p.m., and the trail connecting the school to my village was dimly lit, surrounded by the dense vegetation of the desert. The full moon partially illuminated the path, but the shadows of the mountains created an unsettling, almost oppressive atmosphere. Imagine yourself coming home, tired, after an exhausting day. That was exactly how I felt. I decided to take a shortcut to get home faster. Who hasn't, right? This shortcut passed through an ancient ancestral trail, known in the tribe for its stories of guardian spirits. I never paid much attention to these stories, thinking they were just legends told by the elders. Little did I know, I was about to live one of those true horror stories. The desert silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional sound of a distant coyote. I walked calmly, but something felt out of place. You know that feeling that you are being watched? That was what I felt. A chill ran down my spine. The air seemed heavier, almost suffocating, and an unsettling feeling took over me. Even with the warm desert wind, I could smell something strange, a mix of wet earth and something rotten. I tried to ignore the growing fear, but each step became harder. Each step on the narrow, winding trail echoed sinisterly, amplifying my apprehension. The dense vegetation on both sides seemed to close in on me, making the path even more claustrophobic. I kept my eyes on the ground, trying to avoid stones and branches that could make me trip. My thoughts began to wander to the stories of spirits told by the elders. For the first time, I wondered if there was any truth in those real horror stories. Then, as I rounded a bend, I saw a figure in the middle of the trail. I stopped abruptly, my heart racing. It was a man with a pale appearance, wearing traditional, tattered, and ancient Navajo clothes. He seemed lost, and his vacant gaze caused an immediate chill in me. Reluctantly, I asked in my native language if he needed help. The man did not respond. He just pointed to the path ahead, without looking away. Feeling extremely uncomfortable, I decided to move on and ignore the man. As soon as I passed him, I looked back and saw that he had disappeared. The fear I already felt intensified, and I quickened my pace, wishing to get out of that cursed trail as soon as possible. The feeling of being watched intensified. My hands trembled, and my heart beat uncontrollably. The night, once tranquil, now seemed full of invisible threats. Determined to reach home, I tried to stay calm and move forward. However, the trail seemed to stretch infinitely ahead of me, as if I were trapped in a never-ending nightmare. The feeling of being watched intensified with every step. I began to hear indistinct whispers around me, as if the ancient spirits of the trail were commenting on my presence. This made me hurry even more, the terror taking over me. I began to think I was becoming paranoid, but the fear was too real to be just a product of my imagination. Every shadow seemed to hide something sinister. Every noise seemed a harbinger of doom. I knew I had to keep going, but the despair grew with each step. The path that once seemed familiar now seemed full of unknown dangers. I knew I couldn't stop, couldn't look back. Something inside me screamed to move forward, to not give the unknown a chance. Each step was an effort to maintain sanity, to not give in to the terror that threatened to consume me. The desert, which I knew so well, was now a place of nightmares. And with each step, I approached a destiny I never imagined finding. And so, with my heart racing and my mind alert, I continued down the trail. Little did I know that this night still held many more horrors. What I found next was something I will never be able to forget, something that changed my life forever. Walking along the ancestral trail under the faint moonlight, each step echoed with the weight of 1,000 untold scary stories. I had always been skeptical, believing that the real horror stories told by the elders were just legends to scare children and keep everyone away from the trails after dark. But that night, every shadow and every noise seemed to carry echoes of true and terrifying stories, challenging my disbelief with growing intensity. The further I went, the more the environment seemed to change. The wind that once caressed me now whispered with a mysterious urgency, as if trying to tell me the dark secrets of that trail. The real scary stories for a spooky night no longer seemed so distant. The fear, a feeling I rarely allowed to dominate me, was beginning to take deep root in my heart. Suddenly, an inexplicable cold took over the air, so penetrating that it made me shiver. It was then that I heard the first truly disturbing sound, a low murmur, almost imperceptible, as if the very earth were speaking to me. I stopped, trying to locate the source of the sound, but it seemed to come from all directions, an omnipresent presence in the shadows. I continued walking, each step more hesitant than the last. The feeling of being watched was palpable, as if 1,000 eyes were hidden in the darkness, following my every move. These true horror stories were no longer just tales. They were becoming my reality, a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. The trail began to descend more abruptly, guiding me to an even more isolated area. Large rocks lay along the path, their grotesque shapes illuminated by the moon creating shadows that seemed to move independently. It was then that I realized I was in the heart of one of the true and scary stories I feared. The sound of footsteps broke the night's stillness. They weren't mine. They were light and dragging, as if someone or something was following me, walking along the same ancestral trail. I stopped again, my heart beating so hard I feared it might be heard. The breathing behind me became more audible, a heavy, irregular breathing. Reluctantly, I turned to face whatever was following me, but there was nothing there. The trail was empty, silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat. The fear was now accompanied by confusion and paranoia. The stories of truly terrifying paranormal encounters seemed to have materialized out of nowhere, feeding on my terror. I knew I had to keep going, that I couldn't let fear win. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my mind. After all, I was a teacher, a woman of science, and I wouldn't let myself be carried away by haunted stories of real life without good reason. But that night, my logic was being tested to the extreme. The trail finally began to open, leading to a clearing. The full moon illuminated the open space, and for a moment, I felt relieved to be out of that narrow and oppressive path. But the feeling of relief was short-lived. Ahead, at the edge of the clearing, I saw a figure standing, watching me. It was tall, thin, and at a distance, I could barely distinguish its features. Frozen in place, I watched as the figure began to move toward me. The path I had taken, that decision to follow the ancestral shortcut, had led me directly into one of the real scary stories I never expected to live. The untold stories that the elders whispered were now in front of me, alive and breathing the same cold night air. I knew that the night still held more secrets, that each step forward could reveal more of the veil that separates our world from the unknown. With my heart still pounding and my mind alert, I decided to face whatever awaited me in the clearing. It was time to discover the truth behind the true and scary stories, to face the ghosts I had only known through the words of others. Approaching the clearing cautiously, the air around me seemed to vibrate with a strange, almost palpable energy. The figure I had seen before continued its slow march towards me. There was no more denying that what was happening was real as the true scary stories for a spooky night I always imagined to be just tales to scare. Even so, my heart beat with a mix of fear and fascination. What secrets did this night still hold for me? Each step the figure took towards me seemed to resonate on the ground, beating in the same accelerated rhythm as my heart. The full moonlight illuminated its face, revealing features that seemed both human and distorted, as if they were from another world. For a moment, my instinct was to run, but something in that gaze kept me rooted in place, captured by the intensity of its presence. "Who are you?" My voice came out firmer than I expected. The figure stopped, and the silence that followed was so deep I could swear even the breeze had stopped blowing. Then, with a voice that seemed to come from the depths of the earth, it answered, "I am the guardian of these lands, the one who walks between the shadows of true and scary stories." My mind struggled to process its words. A guardian? Was that what the elders' stories were trying to teach us? It continued, "Many who walk this shortcut do not realize that each step here is a step through the veil that separates the world of the living from the realm of the forgotten. You, however, have seen and persisted." Its voice had a timbre that made the air tremble, filling the night with a resonance that seemed to touch my soul. Curiosity overcame my fear. "What do the forgotten want from me?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my attempt to appear brave. It moved closer, and I could see the complexity in its eyes, shining with 1,000 untold stories. They want you to understand, to know that the true horror stories are more than legends. They are warnings, they are lessons. As it spoke, the environment around me seemed to change. The darkness of the night became denser, and I felt the weight of the generations who had walked this trail before me. They watch and sometimes they guide, it continued, but above all, they test those who dare to walk these sacred lands. I realized then that this night was a test, perhaps an initiation. How can I pass this test? My voice was almost a whisper, carried by the wind that seemed to listen attentively to every word we said. It smiled, a smile that held little comfort and more challenge. Continue your path, Ayla. The answers you seek are ahead, but be prepared. Not all spirits are pleased with the presence of strangers. With these enigmatic words, it began to dissipate like mist under the rising sun, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the night silence. I knew I couldn't turn back, not now that so many mysteries were calling me. With a sigh that carried my fear and determination, I continued on the path, each step resonating with the weight of new understanding. The trail ahead seemed different now, as if every tree, every stone, had gained a new dimension. I walked not just through the desert, but through a tapestry of true horror stories, each whispering their truths to the wind. Each whisper seemed to guide me, pulling me further into the heart of the night, where I knew more revelations awaited me. With my heart still pounding uncontrollably and my mind alert, I continued my journey, knowing the night still held more secrets and that I was only beginning to unravel the true and scary stories hidden in the shadows. The unknown was no longer so terrifying. Now it was an invitation, a challenge to discover how far I could go in search of the truth hidden in the legends. As I proceeded down the path, the atmosphere became increasingly heavy, as if the air was saturated with the memories of all who had walked there before. Despite the fear, there was something almost sacred about that place, a feeling of treading on ground where the veil between the living and the dead was thin. The night, once merely a curtain of darkness, now seemed to vibrate with an ancient and mysterious energy. It didn't take long before I began to hear murmurs. They were low voices, almost imperceptible, as if the wind was trying to tell me secrets in a forgotten language. Ayla, a voice whispered so clearly that I stopped in my tracks. I looked around, but there was no one. The sound came from the bushes or perhaps from the shadows dancing in the moonlight. Ayla, keep going, it insisted, and a chill ran down my spine. I decided to follow the advice of the mysterious voice, moving more cautiously than before. Each step seemed to echo on the ground, resonating in the silence as if it were beating on a distant drum. I wasn't just walking, I was marching towards a truth that part of me feared to discover. The real scary stories I had always heard were becoming my reality. Soon, the trail began to decline, leading me to a valley that seemed swallowed by darkness. The moon, my only companion, cast a faint light that barely touched the ground. I felt as if I were entering the belly of the earth, where untold stories awaited, eager to be revealed. My heart beat not only with fear, but with a palpable expectation. It was then that I noticed something ahead on the trail, a strangely bright object. As I approached, I saw it was a stone, but not just any stone. It emitted its own glow, soft and pulsing, like the heart of something alive. Hesitant, I reached out to touch it. The contact was cold, colder than anything I had ever felt, and the whispering voices intensified. Listen and understand, the voices murmured, as images began to flow into my mind. They were visions of ancient people, perhaps the first inhabitants of this land, performing rituals and celebrations. They danced around bonfires, their shadows cast in frantic dances on the rocky walls of the valley. I was seeing the true and scary stories unfolding before my eyes, witnesses to a forgotten time. Each vision was accompanied by a sense of urgency, a need to understand the purpose of these rituals. It seemed that each celebration, each dance, and each song was interconnected, weaving a story larger than I could comprehend alone. It was as if this stone were a portal, a means of communication between the ancients and the present. Absorbed in the visions, I almost didn't notice when the moon began to set and the first lights of dawn touched the mountain peaks. The reality of my situation returned to me abruptly. I was alone, in an unknown valley, witnessing phenomena that defied my logical understanding. But I couldn't let fear overcome me now. With the arrival of morning, the shadows retreated, and the voices fell silent, leaving only the echo of their words in my mind. Listen and understand. These words became my mantra as I continued my journey, moving deeper into the heart of this mystery. I knew there was more to discover, more stories to unravel. The daylight brought a new perspective to the valley, revealing paths that were not visible under the night's cloak. With each step forward, I felt more determined to uncover the secrets of this place. The stories these lands held were not just tales of the past. They were keys to understanding the present and perhaps even influencing the future. So I continued, with the light of dawn guiding my way and the words of the ancient voices whispering in my mind. Each step was an act of discovery, a journey not only through this valley but through the living and breathing history it contained. And with each new revelation, I came closer to the truth I sought, ready to face whatever awaited me. As the sun rose, bathing the valley in its golden light, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The beauty of the sunrise couldn't completely erase the fear instilled by the experiences of the previous night. Continuing along the now clearly visible path, I realized that each step was taking me deeper into a world I was just beginning to understand. The stories told by the elders, those true and scary stories I heard as a child, weren't just tales to keep us from playing outside after dark. As I walked, the sounds of the day began to fill the silence of the night. The bird songs, the buzzing of insects, the whisper of leaves moved by the gentle breeze, all seemed to bring a sense of normalcy. But normalcy was an illusion, I knew. The visions of the past night and the guardian's words echoed in my mind, a constant reminder that I was involved in something extraordinary. My path led me to a stream whose clear waters ran over stones smoothly polished by time. As I bent down to drink some water, I saw my reflection in the clear surface. The woman looking back at me seemed older, her eyes carrying a new and unsettling knowledge. Listen and understand, the guardian's words echoed, and I knew this journey was far from just physical. Drinking the cold water, I felt a renewed energy flow through me. It was as if the stream shared with me the strength of the earth, the stones, and the trees around, a force that strengthened my body but also sharpened my perception of the invisible things moving at the edge of reality. I stood up, determined to continue despite the fear still accompanying me. Soon ahead, the path forked, and I had to make a choice. To the left, the path climbed toward a moss-covered cliff, and to the right, it descended into a dense forest. Without knowing exactly why, I chose the right path, perhaps drawn by the cool shade of the trees that promised a refuge from the increasing heat of the day. The forest was darker and quieter than I expected. The trees were tall and ancient, their thick trunks covered in moss and their canopies weaving a green roof that barely let sunlight through. The sense of isolation was profound, and again that feeling of being watched returned, more intense than before. Each step I took seemed accompanied by an expectant silence, as if the forest were holding its breath. Then, almost inaudible over the sound of my own steps, I heard a whisper. "Ayla," called a voice as soft and natural as the wind among the leaves. I stopped, looking around, trying to locate the source of the voice. I saw no one, but I felt a chill run down my spine. The voice seemed familiar, as if it belonged to someone I knew, someone who was already part of the true and scary stories that formed the fabric of my life. "Ayla, do not fear," the voice whispered again, and though part of me wanted to run, another part was compelled to stay. I moved forward slowly, each step taking me deeper into the forest's darkness. The sunlight that managed to penetrate the canopy created patterns of light and shadow that danced around me, distorting and transforming everything they touched. My heart beat not just with fear, but with a growing curiosity about what this journey would reveal to me. As I walked, the feeling of an invisible presence grew stronger. I might not see who was calling me, but I felt its presence as clearly as I felt the ground under my feet. It was a frightening sensation, but also comforting, as if I were being guided by an invisible hand. So I continued, moving through the forest with a mix of fear and anticipation, knowing that each step brought me closer to a revelation, to a truth that was waiting for me, hidden in the shadows and whispers of this ancient place. I was alone, but at the same time, I had never been so accompanied. As I ventured further into the forest, each tree seemed to murmur ancient secrets, forming a low chorus that left the air heavy with mystery. I stepped lightly, almost silently, and it made me feel like I was entering a secret place reserved only for those who dared to uncover its mysteries. The sensation of being tested by the forest grew stronger. "Can you withstand discovering what we hide?" seemed to challenge the shadows that lengthened with the evening light. It was as if the history of this place, full of chilling horror stories, was interwoven in the tree roots and hidden under the stones on the path. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine when I clearly heard approaching footsteps. I stopped, holding my breath, trying to identify where they were coming from. The sound was light, almost as if someone were trying to move unnoticed. I looked around, but the density of the trees only increased my anxiety. It was clear that I was not alone, and that only made the stories of truly terrifying paranormal encounters I had heard seem very real. "Who is there?" I called out, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. There was no response, just the sound of the wind passing through the leaves. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, and decided to continue. "I won't let fear win," I told myself, trying to gather courage. As I walked, every natural sound of the forest seemed amplified. The bird songs, the sound of a branch breaking in the distance, the murmur of a nearby stream, all contributed to the feeling that I was walking in a horror movie scene, where every step could be my last. Despite the fear, a part of me was fascinated. I knew I was living one of the true scary stories for a spooky night, and part of me wanted to see how far this would go. What will happen next? I asked aloud, almost expecting the forest to respond. I felt increasingly like the main character in a horror story, every shadow and every movement at the corner of my eye making me jump. But I needed to see this through. I needed to know the secrets this forest held, the true and scary stories that seemed engraved on every leaf and every trail. As the day began to give way to night, the forest transformed. The shadows became denser and the sounds more intense. My heart beat fast, but I kept going, driven by a curiosity that surpassed my fear. I'm getting closer, I thought, feeling that something big was about to happen. Finally, I reached a clearing where the setting sun barely touched the ground. The place had a strange feeling, as if it were charged with energy. The air seemed to vibrate, and I knew I was in the heart of the mystery. "What do you want to show me?" I asked, feeling that I was about to discover something incredible. I waited in silence, my heart beating so loud it seemed to echo through the clearing. I knew the answer to all my questions was about to be revealed, and all I had to do was wait and listen. Upon reaching the clearing, the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and red, a spectacle that, under other circumstances, I would have found magnificent. But there, standing at the heart of the mystery that forest held, I felt a restlessness that went beyond the beauty of the sunset. It was as if that moment was the prelude to something truly terrifying. "You have come this far, Ayla," said a sudden voice, so clear and close that I instinctively turned to find the source. But there was no one. The voice seemed to emanate from the trees themselves, from the shadows that began to lengthen with the falling night. "Are you ready to see what few have seen?" the voice continued, now a whisper carried by the wind. I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in my hands. "Yes, I am ready," I replied, my voice almost a whisper. I knew I couldn't back out now, not after everything I had faced to get there. The true scary stories I had heard since childhood were about to come to life before my eyes. Suddenly, the center of the clearing began to glow. A soft light at first, which grew until it formed a sort of portal. My eyes could hardly believe what they were seeing. It was as if a rift had opened in the fabric of reality, showing images that seemed both impossible and terrifyingly real. The images were vivid and scary, showing untold stories of truly terrifying paranormal encounters. I saw people from another time, dressed in ways I had only seen in history books, some disappearing into dense mists, others being chased by shadows that no light seemed to penetrate. Each scene that unfolded was more intense than the last. They were chilling horror stories, real-life haunted experiences that made me question the line between reality and the supernatural. And as I watched, the voice continued to narrate each event, providing context that made everything even more palpable and, therefore, more terrifying. "These are the true and scary stories this place holds," explained the voice, now sounding melancholic, almost lamenting. "Every person you see was drawn here, just like you, driven by curiosity and the desire to understand the unknown." I felt my heart pounding, my breathing irregular. It was too much information, too much reality being revealed at once. And part of me wanted to run, escape that overwhelming revelation. but my feet were rooted to the ground, unable to move. But why me? I asked, doubt and fear weaving a sticky web in my mind. The answer came accompanied by a cold breeze that made the surrounding leaves whisper, as if sharing an ancient secret. Because you chose to listen, said the voice, now a distant echo. And listening is the first step to understanding. The images in the portal began to fade, the light gently extinguishing, leaving me once again in the twilight that quickly turned into darkness with the coming night. Standing there, as the last light disappeared and the forest resumed its mantle of mystery, I knew my journey was not over. Something told me there was more to discover. That night still held secrets that would only be revealed under the dark hour's cloak. With a sigh, I prepared to continue, knowing that whatever came next could change my perception of the world forever. As the darkness deepened around the clearing, the tension in the air became almost palpable. I was completely enveloped by the mystery the forest held, every shadow and every whisper of the wind seeming to carry ancestral secrets. With my heart racing, I knew I was on the verge of something revelatory, something that could change my understanding of the world around me. Step by step, I advanced towards the center of the clearing where the last vision had disappeared. Part of me feared what I might find, but a greater force pulled me forward, a need to know, to understand. Show me, I murmured to the night. Show me what I need to see. Almost immediately, the atmosphere around me changed. A cold breeze swept through the clearing, lifting leaves and making the tree branches tremble. The sky above me was starry, but it seemed as if each star blinked in sync, as if encoding a message. My whole body shivered with the expectation of the unknown. Then, as suddenly as it started, silence fell. A strange and uncomfortable peace settled, and a soft light began to emanate from the ground of the clearing. It was soft and ethereal, illuminating the area with a glow that did not seem of this world. Fixing my eyes on the light, I began to feel my body lighten, as if I were floating. In this trance, images began to dance before my eyes. I saw the woman from the previous vision, her face marked by terror, but also by resolution. I saw the shadows that pursued her, dark and threatening forms that now seemed less terrifying and more sad, as if they were lost souls seeking peace. Their story unfolded not as a horror tale, but as an ancient tragedy, full of misunderstandings and unresolved fears. The intensity of the experience grew to the point where I no longer knew where the forest ended, and my being began. And then, as suddenly as it started, everything went dark. I woke with a start. I was lying in my own bed, the morning sun filtering through the curtains. For a moment, I was disoriented, my heart still pounding in my chest. Had it been real? The images, the voices, the clearing, everything seemed so vivid, but now in the daylight, it began to dissolve like mist in the sun. I got up, still trembling, and walked to the window. Outside, the world seemed the same as always, but something inside me had changed. There was a new depth in my soul, a sense of having touched something ancient and forgotten. I looked at my reflection in the window glass, questioning whether the journey of the past night had been a dream, a vision, or something more. As I pondered, a gentle breeze entered through the window, bringing the distant smell of leaves and earth, a subtle reminder that, dream or not, something real had happened. Something I would carry with me, a true and scary story engraved not only in memory but in the heart. If you like this horror story, you can't miss Mark's story. After buying a set of old dolls at a garage sale, he encounters a series of disturbing events in his home. What began as an innocent purchase quickly turns into a nightmare. Food spoils inexplicably, footsteps echo through the house without explanation, and a constant sense of an invisible presence lingers. As the atmosphere of terror intensifies, Mark is forced to investigate the origin of the dolls and confront something far beyond his understanding. To follow Mark's journey and discover what happens to him, watch the video in the card above or look for the previous video here on the channel. And, of course, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments if you've ever had a paranormal experience too. Stay brave and see you in the next creepy story.